Hi Year 6 and welcome to my sharing of the book Charles Darwin and the Theory of Evolution. Please feel free to pause the video to make notes in your learning journal as specified in the learning document. Okay. Chapter 1. Always a Naturalist. As a boy in England during the early 1800s, Charles Darwin was curious about the natural world. Being from a wealthy family, Darwin had few chores and plenty of time to explore the countryside. Look, father, this moth has 6 red spots. We haven't any moths like this in Shropshire. Oh, Charles, you spend all your time chasing after bugs. If only you cared as much about your studies. Robert Darwin sent his son to the best schools. He wanted Charles to become a doctor or an important gentleman, but instead of studying, Charles hunted birds and collected bugs. If you wanted to take notes, Charles, you could have just gone to class today. Darwin paid no attention to teasing. He followed his curiosity even as an adult. 2 rare beetles. I must take them back for my collection. Another beetle, but my hands are full. Blech, how bitter. Catching all 3 of you may have gotten my name into the Book of British Insects. While going to school at Cambridge, Darwin admired the work of naturalist and professor George Henslow. I told the farmer I could make a fine fertilizer if he would allow me to dig up the fossilized animal droppings from the soil. Did he agree, Professor? Yes, Charles, and the crop yielded record numbers, and yes, we can discuss my findings tomorrow. Darwin spent much time with his mentor. He was eager to show Henslow his latest discoveries. I've never seen pollen grains stand up like this. I must show Professor Henslow right away. Professor! What is it, Charles? Look at these pollen grains. I've never seen anything like them. It is interesting, Charles, but many botanists have shared the excitement of discovering this pollen. Should have done more research before telling the professor, I think. I am determined not to be in such a hurry again to communicate my discoveries. In 1831, Darwin received a letter from Henslow. Captain Robert Fitzroy would soon set sail on a voyage around the world. He wanted a naturalist to join in this adventure. August 24th, 1831. Charles, you are qualified for collecting, observing and noting anything worthy. I've been asked to travel the world as a scientist, father. My studies will finally prove useful. I will not allow it. Many foolish young men have died following such crazy ideas. Darwin got his uncle Josiah Wedgwood to help change his father's mind about the trip. Foolishness is not giving your bug-collecting son this chance. OK, Charles, you may go. I suppose you'll need me to pay the bills for this trip too. A 90-foot, 27 metres long and 24 feet, 7 metres wide, the HMS Beagle was a small ship, with about 70 people sharing the ship's cramped space. Darwin's life on the ship would be much different from his life in England. I have just room to turn around and that is all. But I can't wait to fill this room with rocks, plants and animals from far-off places. For the next 5 years, Darwin lived in a corner of the captain's chart room. He was also given a small space on board to store the glass specimen jars, microscopes and writing paper he needed for his work. Chapter 2. Voyage of the HMS Beagle. The Beagle set sail on the 27th of December 1831. We've been sailing for weeks. The only thing I've discovered is a dreadful seasickness. On January the 16th, 1832, the Beagle finally dropped anchor near the island of São Tiago, off the coast of Africa. Men, look! Have you ever seen such fascinating corals? And just look at the soil layers in the cliff. The Beagle stayed near the island for 24 days. During this time, Darwin collected as many samples of rocks, plants and animals as he could. What? Seashells. How did they get so high above the waterline? Cuttlefish. Fellows, bring a jar. Pull. Watch your step. Let's get this fish safely on board the ship. The Beagle continued its global trek. After crossing the equator, the ship landed in Brazil. Humans seem like a tiny part of the living world, one species among countless others. Good thing there's no elephants here, or he'd find a way to put one in the dinghy. Darwin's collection of unusual specimens grew. He kept careful notes of everything he saw. Dear Professor Henslow, I am sending the most amazing specimens. For 2 whole years, Darwin shipped samples and notes to Henslow whenever the Beagle reached port or met up with a ship heading for England. He heard nothing back. Maybe my collections are so poor he can't bear to tell me. Perhaps I wasn't cut out for this job. Finally, in March 1834, Darwin received word from Henslow. My collections are of great use. Henslow says I am destined to be a man of science. Darwin had new determination and curiosity. He worked even harder in collecting and making notes. Seashell fossils in a cliff above the ocean. How could this be? Petrified wood? That would take water. When would these trees have been under water? On September the 15th, 1835, the Beagle arrived at a group of islands called the Galapagos off the coast of Ecuador. A lizard that feeds in the sea? How unusual! The black lava rocks on the beach are frequented by large, most disgusting, clumsy lizards. I prefer the lizard's taste to the tortoise. You can tell which island a tortoise lives on from the shape of its shell, Captain Fitzroy. I hadn't thought to label specimens by island. Let's hope they taste different as well. That finch has an interesting beak. Let's take one back. This blackbird looks a lot like that finch. Darwin spent about a month studying the Galapagos before the Beagle continued its journey. On October 2nd, 1836, the Beagle arrived back in England. Chapter 3. A Theory Comes Together. Back in England, Darwin immediately started reviewing his notes. He found experts such as John Gould to help him examine his collections. Charles, these birds are all finches. No blackbirds or wrens? Not a one. They are all the same type of finch as found on the mainland of South America. Same finch, but with each slightly different. Why would the same birds have different beaks? To eat different food. Small pointy beaks for eating bugs, thick strong beaks for cracking open big seeds. The birds seem to have changed along with the conditions of each island. Were all these finches created differently from the beginning? Or did one kind of finch actually adapt to the environment over time? By the summer of 1837, Darwin had some of his Beagle journal ready to publish, but he couldn't stop thinking about why species might evolve or change. He discussed his ideas with geologist and friend Sir Charles Lyell. Your geological theory has the Earth changing over time, Dr. Lyell. Yes, but very slowly. Perhaps animal species also evolve slowly over time. What are you saying, Charles? Rocks and layers of dirt are one thing, but living species? I don't know. Maybe God made living things with an ability to change. Are you saying humans evolved over time? Didn't God make all living things just as they should be? Perhaps the world is set up to evolve. Darwin started writing Notebook B. He tracked evidence of species changing and developed a theory on why some species were so similar. In 1839, Darwin married Emma Wedgwood. She helped him write letters to scientists, sailors and farmers. He was looking for anyone who could collect more information for his research. Emma, if I die before my work is finished, promise me you will publish these notes. People won't like my ideas because they challenge beliefs about the creation of living things, but my findings are important. Of course, Charles, but no more talk of dying. You'll scare the children. By 1854, Darwin was able to work on his ideas about how species evolve. Darwin studied crossbreeding in pigeons. The striped birds and redbirds will mate, then we'll see what their chicks look like. Perhaps nature works to get the best qualities in one species. In the spring of 1856, Lyell visited Darwin. I believe I know why species evolve. They must compete to survive. Animals and plants compete? Yes. Like two companies with the same product, the smarter one will be successful. I don't know if I believe your theory, but I think it's time to share it. Darwin made his theory of evolution public on July 1st, 1858. He presented his idea to scientists at the Linnean Society. So the birds with thicker beaks would be more likely to survive on that island. When they mate, more thick-beaked birds are produced. As time goes on, the birds with the thin beaks die out. On November 22nd, 1859, nearly 30 years after Darwin's Beagle voyage, Origin of Species went on sale. Is that book about evolution? Do they have any more copies? All 1,250 copies of the book sold on the first day. Chapter 4. The World Reacts. Most people didn't know what to think of Darwin's theory. Soon scientists and religious leaders started arguing. Do Darwin's ideas on natural selection mean that God did not create people? Why, if that's true, then people and apes could be cousins of sorts. Mind you, as scholars we must keep an open mind to all possibilities. I find Darwin's ideas very interesting. A great debate took place at England's Oxford University in June of 1860. Why should a scientist be trying to prove that his grandmother was an ape? Scientists should study the wonder of God's creation. They don't need to second guess it. Yes, follow God's word. Time changes things. Why shouldn't creatures change? Darwin's theory only shows how changes occur. The only thing that doesn't seem able to change is the minds of the clergy. Oh! Darwin didn't have the strength or interest to debate his theory. He figured most misunderstandings could be solved with better data. Throughout his life, Darwin kept working and writing more about his theory. And of course, he couldn't resist studying other curiosities as they came along. I see one pollinating bee and now I'm studying orchids. Scientists still continue to research natural selection in the Galapagos Islands. Researchers have used DNA tests and field data to track changes in the finches. Here's another bird with a short beak. There seems to be more of these birds around after the drought 2 years ago. Charles Darwin's theory continue to inspire scientists. Breakthroughs in studies of DNA and genetics continue today because of Darwin's work. And tomorrow I'm going to show you some videos about the marine iguana and how it adapted to live in the Galapagos Islands. And I'm also going to show you sorry, that's come up on the screen. I'm also going to show you how the El Nino, how the marine iguana adapted to the El Nino phenomenon in the last 20 years or so. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Year 6.